Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, Lauren Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. I really should have been talking about this situation a long time ago, but I've been busy. There have been updates near constantly. I can't even really keep track of the situation. But the long and short of the matter is that Sony is essentially doomed. Microsoft, upon acquiring Activision Blizzard, is essentially going to strip away the only property keeping PlayStation relevant, which is, in fact, Call of Duty. Without Call of Duty, PlayStation cannot remain competitive, and they will lose out to Xbox and PC. This is a huge, phenomenal deal, okay? I think a lot of people are really downplaying just how the only reason people play PlayStation is for like the unholy trinity, right? Grand Theft Auto, annual sports games, and the annual Call of Duty releases, right? But with Grand Theft Auto falling off, with like 6 looking like it's going to be a complete disaster, with EA losing like the FIFA license, and the sports games being having a reputation for being kind of trash anyway, and with Call of Duty, going to Xbox, the writing on the wall is clear. PlayStation is done. And there's a very good reason why they're so vehemently fighting against it, trying to file all these lawsuits, trying to get governments around the world to fight against this thing, and now we're seeing more and more that Microsoft has their own paid off politicians fighting for their cause. Some senator from Washington just came out and talked a little bit. Surprisingly hard. It's like she watched my videos and was just like, "Holy shit, Sony is corrupt." It legit came off that way because she was talking about some of the things I talk about when it comes to how Sony has overwhelming control over the Japanese gaming media and the publishers there and stuff like that, and how they've always had an unfair slant over the competition. It's been like that for a while, and but now it feels like it's becoming mainstream. It's becoming a real political issue because Microsoft, Sony in this dick measuring contest in order to acquire Call of Duty, or rather to prevent to keep it multiplat. They are exposing a lot of things that the public isn't really supposed to know about. When it comes to say how much control Sony has over the industry, or how viable of a franchise COD really is, or just how how Nintendo is just dominating even without it. It feels almost as if we're kind of in the end stage, the end game of the PlayStation era. It really does feel like in the current year, this decade, this generation, PlayStation can no longer viably compete. They used to be able to just pay a bunch of third-party publishers to release timed exclusives on PlayStation, and that was enough to keep them relevant, to keep them competitive against Nintendo and Microsoft. But now Microsoft owns those companies. At the very least, Sony every single time is going to have to navigate them if they're going to get Psychonauts 3 or Call of Duty or Diablo or whatever else Microsoft owns now. Sony's always going to have to negotiate, and that puts them in a very poor position, even if Call of Duty actually does see releases on PlayStation. At the very least, this will stop the practice that of them just paying for 4 exclusive missions on their console, right? That used to be a thing in the Assassin's Creed days when that was relevant. They would pay for 4 tiny inconsequential additional DLC missions that were exclusive to PlayStation, and that would be enough to make that version of the game the most popular because it technically had more stuff. It didn't matter that the vast majority of audiences never actually reached that content or used it or enjoyed it, but just the fact that it was technically better was enough to drive sales. And now, with this acquisition, that is no longer possible. That strategy of weaponizing these independent publishers by simply paying them off for exclusives, right? Yakuza never really left PlayStation. Final Fantasy, Square Enix has gone on record in the recent past about how their priority as a company is to sell people on PlayStations because they know that a big chunk of their business is accepting bribes from Sony and just promoting this console brand. Never mind that supposed to be like supporting every major platform, like they are essentially like a Sony subsidiary, because of the way this is set up. But with Microsoft coming in and just acquiring all these companies, PlayStation's traditional strategy is no longer viable. And like Jim Ryan knows it. Like Jim Ryan is terrified. He's like shitting his pants. This is something that will like straight up destroy them. Honestly, long term, right? And like Nintendo knows it, Xbox knows it. They have like put Sony into a very, very bad position. Sony will not be able to build a COD competitor. Like they know it, their competitors know it, everyone knows it. And that is why they are so desperately trying to hang on to this IP, because without it, they have nothing. How many kids, buy their first console because of Call of Duty, right? Like it's essentially everyone, right? If you ask a bunch of kids what they're playing, it's either like Fortnite or like Call of Duty, right? And it's really only because of like brand recognition for Call of Duty. It's not because Call of Duty is like inherently like the most popular video game franchise in the world, or like the best or the most appealing to kids. Like it's because it's Call of Duty, right? It just has brand recognition. It is the first video game a lot of these people ever see. And as a result of it, it's like, the first game, like the first online game that a lot of people play. And as a result of that, like at the very least, you have probably played a COD game, even if you're not like, a big gamer or a big fan of games in general, right? Again, this is the thing about Call of Duty, is that like it has appeal for the masses in spite of like, enthusiasts like generally having a consensus that like the series was never all that good and that you're better off, like, there are so many other series that do the same thing better. Like when it comes to like the mass market, the general public, like Call of Duty is the video game franchise, the annual first person shooter franchise. And without the best version of COD, PlayStation's done. They can't remain competitive. And it's true that like still technically have like the two other sides of like the unholy trinity, Grand Theft Auto and the annual sports games, but like the Grand Theft Auto is losing its luster as well. All right, like Red Dead Redemption 2, I think kind of demonstrated that like there's really nowhere for Rockstar Games to go. Honestly, they tried doing the same thing with Red Dead Redemption Online that they did with Grand Theft Auto Online, but without that like that feeling of wish fulfillment of actually being like wealthy in game, of actually like being able to like drive around in nice cars. Like it died fairly quickly. Nobody really talks about it, just like they never talked about how badly written the single player campaign was, or how like you're basically going down a hallway in an open world setting. Like there is I feel very much so that Rockstar Games, Grand Theft Auto is going to fall off at some point. Like it's one franchise that really is only propped up by the fact that, oh, it's Grand Theft Auto. It's not going to last forever, essentially. Like there are going to be games that outdo Grand Theft Auto. When it comes to like pure open world games, there already are. The problem is that like Grand Theft Auto technically fulfills appeals to a certain demographic that isn't going to be easily penetrated. Like when it comes to like people who like fetishize gangster shit and mass murdering as many people as possible. Like Saints Row technically did that better, but Saints Row fell off before Grand Theft Auto did, right? But I think it's inevitable that at some point we're going to see a franchise come out that actually does Grand Theft Auto better than Grand Theft Auto, especially with like Grand Theft Auto 6 looking like it's going to be a disaster. Like it's going to impact the brand, okay? Even if it doesn't happen right away. It might be 10 years from now, it might be 20, 30, who knows? Like, and again, when it happens, people will just move on, right? Like Metal Gear Solid fell off like with Metal Gear Solid 5, and like it's weird to think about how little people talk about that franchise now, right? Final Fantasy fell off, and nobody's really talking about those games anymore. Like again, we're at that point now where there are so many options to like games you can play. Like I don't think video game franchises can like grow indefinitely and like just maintain their audience forever. Like I think Microsoft is going to succeed acquiring Call of Duty, but then because like without like the PlayStation demographic like hyping these games up every year, like Call of Duty is going to fail. But conversely, without the Call of Duty audience, PlayStation is going to fail. So essentially the deal is going to screw over both the Call of Duty people and Sony. Like Microsoft, I think is like getting everything they need out of this. But when it comes to like the Call of Duty crowd, like this is going to be a disaster for the brand for sure. And I just can't help but wonder just what's going to be next. Like how many more video game franchises are going to have to die before the general public starts to understand that like wow, I don't like PlayStation anymore. Like how long is it going to be until people start like admitting to themselves that like wow, PlayStation as a brand doesn't offer me anything anymore. I don't enjoy what PlayStation produces. How much longer until we get like a serious look at what these what these creators are doing and start realizing that like wow, maybe we should move on to other platforms, maybe we should move on to Nintendo. And I do think it's sooner than you might think. I think the PC industry is kind of crumbling among itself. I think Xbox is already irrelevant, and like Nintendo is like kind of poised to kind of dominate this video game industry like when it comes to like dedicated video game platforms, right? It is going to continue just producing high quality content for its audience. And I'm really looking forward to that. I am really looking forward to the day in which like we stop talking about consoles and platforms and like PC gaming and just start focusing on the games again. And I think the only way that's going to happen is if like Nintendo is the only dedicated gaming platform on the market. And it's a big reason why I've always been advocating for a Nintendo monopoly is because when all is said and done, what exactly did Sony and Microsoft ever contribute to the video game industry? All they've done is just like throw money around, introduce all these poor practices and ruin like dozens and dozens of companies. Without them, a lot of these terrible acquisitions and ideas and franchises would never have happened. Like gaming would have been objectively better if Nintendo had been the only console manufacturer on the market in the mid 2000s up until the current day, right? Like none of these companies contributed anything to gaming at any point, and I will be very happy to see them go.